Hello folks, and welcome to what I hope will be a decent guide to learning the basics of traps in Gnomoria. First things first, of course, you're going to have to build a tinker bench to research all the stuff you're going to need. They can be pretty slow at first, so it's going to be a while before you've got everything unlocked that you see mentioned. However, you can build multiple tinker benches to speed up the process, because they all share and work towards the same progress bar. This one's been already completed because it's full. I used to have two myself, but since there was no more research left to get, I deconstructed it. Now once that's done, you're going to need two more workshops. A machine shop for the fabrication of the base parts, here like rods, gears, springs, etc. And the engineer shop to make the bigger parts and actual traps themselves. Now one thing I highly recommend before you start making the different parts. Go into the overview tab. The overview tab of the machine shop. And unselect accept generated jobs. Why, do you ask? Because usually when the engineer shop makes something, it requires parts from the machine shop. And then the machine shop will just randomly grab whatever ore is closest. It won't care what value it is, it doesn't care if it's a precious metal or an industrial metal. So you'll end up wasting precious bronze, iron, steel, etc. when you're not really ready to give up that good ore yet. Like right now, my guys are still in bronze boots and gloves and such. And I don't want them wasting the steel bars on that. The only downside to not having it generate jobs is that you'll have to manually go in and do it yourself. You have to pick the bars and everything, make the parts you need. It's a little more work, but compared to losing very scarce, high-end materials like steel, it's worth it. Alright, you got your You got your workshops up and have some lower bars to work with. Where should you start first? The simple answer is power generation. All traps beyond the first two simple blade and spike traps require power to work. Before we get to that though, I'll go over the simple ones. The first one is the simple blade trap. All they take is a trap base and a blade made from your weaponsmith. Just plop it down anywhere you want. We'll wait until he builds it. And bam, there you go. Now as you see, it doesn't say anything about needing power. That's the good thing, they don't take power. Unfortunately, well, I'll get to that in a second. The other one is the spike trap. Both of these traps have to be placed on a valid floor tile. It can't be blocked and it can't be missing the floor, so you can't build on walls. That one too. They basically run themselves. As soon as a single unit walks over it, they'll fire off and do damage to that unit. They get one attack based on as if it were a normal weapon swing. And that's where the caveat comes in. You'll notice I said when any unit walks on it, not when an enemy walks on it. These basic traps don't know the difference between gnomes, goblins, mants, etc. So if one of your guys happens to walk over them, it's going to swing and probably take his leg off. You don't really want that. So the next caveat, there is another one. When they are triggered, they'll create a reset trap job on themselves. Which means any gnome with the mechanic skill will come up and try to reset the trap even if there's still combat going on nearby. Which means they're probably going to get seen, they're probably going to get attacked, and they're probably going to die. Not really all that useful. Most folks recommend setting your military squads as the only mechanic users, or the ones with the mechanic skill, so no civilian gnomes are taking chances, running into the fray to reset traps and end up getting their arms lopped off or something. But if you find a good use for them, more power to you. Now, back to power generation. There's currently 3 ways to generate power: a hand crank, a steam engine, and the most popular choice, windmills. The hand crank isn't commonly chosen simply because not only is its power generation limited, but it requires a gnome to, as the name implies, actively be cranking it to generate power. If that gnome gets tired or hungry and leaves or gets attacked and killed, bam, you're out of power. There's no one running it. And someone else might try to come up and get attacked too, so that's not really worth it. For those same reasons, I'm not going to cover it using them in this video. I'm just mentioning it because it's there. The steam engine is the next option, though still a lot less used. It doesn't require a gnome's focused attention to run, but it does run off coal, so they're generally best used on non-always-on traps like lava, water pumps, or some forms of mechanical wall traps. As you see here, you just gotta click turn it on, and then someone ought to show up with some coal to get it running. Here he comes. It would be a tired one. And now he's refueling it. I just wish that we used one of the faster gnomes. There he goes. And now you see it's moving now that it's running. So apparently 1 coal is equal to 1 point of fuel. It puts out 200 power as long as it's running. So that means it's going to be eating coal that entire time, but that's a lot of power comparatively. It depends on whether you want to have someone feeding it coal and you've got enough coal to last, or if you just want to have a hands-off approach. I don't care to have this kind of maintenance and resource waste, so we're going to turn that off. Now, speaking of hands-off, that brings us to the final option, windmills. As you see here, I've already built a couple of them, and if you click them and open their info window, you see 3 lines of information: total power, total required power, and output power. Total power is obviously how much power is being generated by all the windmills in the immediate area. It may even be total power in the network, but I've not really built anything large scale enough to test that. And this is just about the basics anyways, so you don't have to worry about it right now. Total required power is how much power all the things that are connected to that specific network require to run. However, keep in mind that this total required is only for objects that aren't quote-unquote disconnected by levers, and possibly any other mechanical walls or hatches that are triggered by pressure plates. So it's a good idea to have more than the bare minimum of power just in case. You'll see an example of that when I show you the capture trap I have later on in the video. Output power is simply how much power that specific windmill is generating. They all make 20 power. Now while we're on the topic of power use, everything in the network will use varying amounts of power. Each gearbox uses 3 power, as you see here. Every axle that you use to distribute the power will take a power each. Hatches require 10 power, and mechanical walls require 20. Pressure plates are a little more complex. They need power feeding into them to power whatever's nearby it, and similar to a lever, when it's disengaged, it doesn't take power, nor does it let the adjacent traps take power. Though as mentioned earlier, this makes them not visible in the total required power count in the network while the plate is disengaged. You can open their window and click Change Setting to make it so that their power is stopped when stepped on instead. However, the total required power there is how much needs to be coming through it to activate the adjacent traps, not how much is in the whole network, just that area. As you see, this pressure plate powers 2 hatches next to it, so it requires 20. Alright, before we go any deeper onto pressure plate mechanics though, let's go back to power distribution. So here at our windmills, they're built, they're producing power, but the question is, how do we get it where we want it? This is a mechanical wall. Let's say this is my base entrance, and for the purpose of the example, we're going to pretend that there's walls around it and all that stuff, so it's not so easy to just walk around in any direction. Let's say I want to use it to make a drawbridge of sorts. I have to get power from the windmills down to the wall somehow, and that's where 2 things come in: axles and gearboxes. Axles you can think of like power lines. They simply transmit power straight ahead. The problem is, they don't turn corners. See, I can place 3 there and they'll get built. They'll connect to each other and they'll connect to the gearboxes. But the problem is, they don't turn corners. They'll just sit there unconnected. That's where the gearboxes come in. Now you'll notice it looks like there's nothing built there. You gotta press the Q button to show axles. And at first they'll simply be just sitting there like that, but once they connect they'll attach to each other. And of course that guy got bored halfway through and didn't finish building. So in order to turn corners, you have to bring in gearboxes. Gearboxes require that you have dug out the floor. They cannot be placed on floors. Axles can be placed on floors like that, or they can be placed where there's no floor, so it doesn't really matter. As you see there, there's no floor there, but there is a floor there, so it can be either one and they'll still work. Now, gearboxes are sort of like a transformer or a hub. They take and transmit power from any side, including the top and the bottom. So in order to power our drawbridge wall, and pretending for the sake of the example there's walls up above, so we're going to have to take the power down here on this level, instead of up here. Now as you see, it says total power 60, and there's 20 output power but no required power yet. That's because it doesn't just magically teleport down from the wind into the gearbox. I'll deal with him in a minute. So in order to get power from one level to another, you build a vertical axle. You simply place them on top of gearboxes. One coming down from the windmill, and one going up to the mechanical wall. And the best way to make sure that they're connecting to what they're supposed to on different levels is to simply hover your mouse over it, or your construction thing, whatever, and then scroll down with the mouse wheel. They should match up, unless you've got some weird settings. So we've got our gearboxes down, and we've got the axles connecting them, but you'll note I left one blank. That's where levers come in. Levers act sort of like a light switch, basically. By default, they allow power to go through them, but if you pull the lever, aka flip the switch, it turns it off. I'll let this finish building while I deal with the merchant and come back. Actually, this is a perfect example to show off how levers work. Just open up the window, pull lever, and then wait for someone to get over here and pull it. All these jobs require someone with the mechanic skill, so you want to make sure you're careful about who you assign to be a mechanic. Now, as you see, he pulled the lever. Those things are no longer spinning. That means the power's been cut and the mechanical wall came down. And as you see here, the windmill comes down to the gearbox, brings it over to another gearbox, brings it up to the switch, and then the switch transmits the power. Tell him to pull the lever again, and then bam, it'll be back on. Now, as you'll note, you saw my guy came down to grab that bear corpse. If someone is standing on a mechanical wall when it's raised up, and if there's a floor above it, it will crush them and it will kill them instantly. So be very careful when you are working with that. Make sure no one's going to be wandering out to loot random crap. Alright, we'll finish building up this one to show how it's connected and put together. He's building the lever right now. And you see they're all spinning now, showing that they've got power flowing through them. Now see, that one's spinning too. And the wall came up by itself. Tell someone to come pull the lever and open the drawbridge, so to speak. And bam, it's down. Simple. Then when you want to close up, just tell them to pull the lever again. Bam, drawbridge closed. One extra note. The quality of ore that you use, whatever bars you use, does not matter when it comes to axles, windmills, and walls. Mobs won't attack walls or try to take them down, at least not yet. So generally you want to use your spare copper and malachite for this. Hell, you could probably even use tin. But the spike and blade traps, their damage does depend on what ore and bar you use. So for example, an iron blade trap would do more damage and be more powerful than a copper blade trap would be. So keep that in mind if you use those. Now the wiki, I will leave a link to that in the description of the video. It has a fair few good examples of simple traps to make. The trickle feeders, the path redirection traps, stuff like that. What I have here is a mix of both. This pressure plate here with the two hatches behind it is an example of a trickle feeder trap. Say a goblin invasion showed up and they started pathing. Some of them made it past this trap. They come up along this path, one guy steps on the plate, and these... I don't have power running to it right now, so they're open, but if there was power running to it, those hatches would be closed. So they come running up, the raider hits that, and then the guys following him get dropped down. Now in a trickle feeder trap, this area here would just be a long hallway going back up to the beginning. So they'd come out right here and then try to go the path again over and over until they all get through. Ergo the name Trickle Trap. They trickle in one by one to get killed by my squad. And the other one is the Path Redirection Trap. What you basically do is get walls on this side, get a pressure plate in the middle, two mechanical walls, and a hatch. Now when something walks in and steps on this plate, it's going to raise both mechanical walls and close the hatch. And since the hatch is the only valid tile for them to move to, they move over onto the tile, but then that cuts power to the pressure plate. So the walls lower, the hatch opens, and bam, they drop down into your trap. You can either trap them like I did and just have your crossbow squad pick them off. And crossbow guys, I think, can shoot through the fence. They've been doing it. Although they prefer to go up here and shoot down from above for some reason. I don't know why. Or you can have them drop down like 7 or 8 floors and die on impact using fall damage to your advantage, but those are a lot more work intensive to dig out the floors and then remove the walls, etc. Or you could use that just like the trickle feeder trap, have them go back and back. That's basically what I've got running here. Got a whole bunch of windmills over here making tons of power. And it comes down here. See, it's got a pretty big range on how far away the windmills all count towards the same total. I don't even know if there is a limit as long as they're next to each other. Who knows? But it comes down here, it's routed down to a hub. Now I've got it set up so that this lever opens this wall, so in case a merchant gets trapped there or some nomads get trapped there, I can let them out into my base. These other two levers are here to disable power to the pressure plate traps, so that in case, like those merchants, when they try to exit, they always seem to come through this trap, and bam, they end up stepping there, falling down, pathing up, repeating in an infinite loop over and over and over again. And if you ever get a mob caught in an infinite loop, it lags the game like crazy. So if I see a merchant trying to exit that way, I send someone down here, pull the lever, and bam, they can get out. And the walls are pretty much aesthetic, you can use whatever you want for them, really. Although having fences makes it easier to spot them line of sight. And I think that's pretty much the basics. Everything I've covered in the video should give you enough knowledge to get started. You make your own traps, try to trickle them in for your army to level on, or just have them fall into a nice little pit like this to be picked off and then cleaned up. If you enjoy the video, or if it helped you any, give it a like, spread the word about it, share it, help me out that way.